Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I'll be making a traveler's notebook sleeve. I've made this from fabric paper, so it's very durable, and that way you can swap it out and reuse the sleeve over and over again. It has a beautiful finish so you don't see the stretchy cording along the spine, and it features a magnetic closure. Let me show you how I made this. I'm starting off here with a sheet of fabric paper. It actually used to be called paper leather. I bought it from Sizzix. I think now they call it, they're called texture rolls now, and they come in a variety of different colors now. Before, you could only get them, I think, in black, white, and craft. But Sizzix isn't the only one who sells these. You can also get them from Craftex. That's another popular brand. And I'm cutting this down to 9 3/4 of an inch by 7 5/8 of an inch. Now, I was designing on the fly a little bit. I did make this once already, just to see if it worked. And it does. So along that 7 5/8 inch edge, I'm going to score a line at 3 5/8 of an inch. Some of these measurements you can definitely adapt a little bit, and I'll kind of tell you why. If you wanted to go ahead and actually cut this piece to a full 8 inches and then just score in half at 4 inches, that might actually make things a little bit simpler. However, the reason why I chose to do it this way is so that the inside edge of this little pocket is actually a little bit more narrow than the outside edge. And what I've done is along that 9 3/4 inch edge, I actually scored on one end at 3/8 of an inch. And then I cut away the portion that is going to be on the inside of the book cover. I flipped that 180 degrees around to the other end, and on this side I actually scored it at 1/2 an inch. So again, you can kind of cut a larger piece if you really want to have equal sized glue tabs. Totally up to you. But you can see here that on one side, the width of my pocket here, this little pocket sleeve, is 4 inches wide. The width of the other one is 3 5/8, but I don't want my glue tab visible, so I've had to cut and notch out a little portion. And that's why I said if you cut a piece that is 8 inches wide and then scored that in half, then your glue tab you're not going to have a section of your glue tab that's visible that you would have to trim off like I have. What I was careful to do is I wanted the glue tab to be coming from the front or from the outside of the cover so that I get a nicer finish, so that that nice folded edge is coming from the outside of the cover inwards, and that gives you a slightly nicer finish when you're looking at it from the outside of the notebook. I've run a line of score tape because I want everything to be nice and strong, but I needed a little bit of wiggle room to get this firmly attached in a perfect, alignment. And also the liquid adhesive is going to give me a nice permanent bond as well. So the combination of the two I find really helpful because the dry adhesive will give me a nice, instant grab so that I can just continue to work with my project. But once that liquid adhesive dries, it's going to be a really nice permanent bond. So now I have my two sleeves. I did pull out the cording that came with the original Graphic 45 Traveler's Notebook that was used as the closure. We won't need that. And in fact, I actually used that cording on a separate project because it's perfectly functional. It's just for my sleeve here, I'm actually going to create a magnetic closure, which I actually prefer. So that gives me a nicer finish on the outside. And I've decided to use some papers from the Let It Be paper collection. And mostly the reason for that is because I only had enough of the paper leather in black, because in total I needed 3 sheets, more like maybe 2.5, but I didn't have enough to create in the white or cream color, which is what I think would look better with the Cafe Parisien DCE. So I'll be doing another one of these, but with that paper collection once I get more fabric paper. Now, this fabric paper, there's a couple of different places you could get it. Sizzix sells it as, they call it texture rolls, and they come in a huge variety of colors. I think they just released a line of pastel colors. So you can get them in fun colors as well as your basic black, white, and craft. The other brand that is pretty well known is Craftex. And I've purchased Craftex branded fabric paper off of Amazon. I'll leave links to everything that I can find in the description box below. But that brand does have a variety of colors as well. They tend to be a little bit more muted, more in your grays, your browns, more in the neutrals. So if you're looking for something a little bit more bright and fun, I think you'll be able to find that with Sizzix. And the nice thing with how they are releasing these fabric papers now is that instead of selling them by the sheet, which is how they used to be sold under Sizzix, they're sold as a longer roll. And so then you can just cut to length what you need. And that gives you actually a little bit more option for the size project that you're using them on. And the reason why you might want to use something like this, especially for things like album covers, notebook covers, and sleeves like what I'm making here, is because these fabric papers, even though they're made from paper, they are super, super durable. They are tear resistant. You can wash them and get some really nice effects by crinkling them up. You can moisten them a little bit, run them through your embossing folder if you want to add some texture to them. You can do quite a lot with these, more than what I've done here. I'm almost basically just using it as if it was cardstock. The nice thing about it, though, is unlike cardstock, this is going to last a really long time, and because it's tear resistant, and so it's going to be durable. And what I like about this, because you could always decorate your pre-made traveler's notebook and as it comes, but what's nice about creating this sleeve is if you have some gorgeous pattern paper that you love, you can use this fabric paper, and it's going to be longer lasting. And if the spine of your traveler's notebook ends up wearing down over time, or for whatever reason you feel like you need to replace it, you can always pull that out of the sleeve and swap it. Also, if you happen to use several different traveler's notebooks for different purposes, maybe you have one for work, maybe you have one for actual travel, maybe you have one for all of your craft ideas, it might be nice to have a single sleeve that if you are traveling on the go or something, you can always swap in and out the one that you want to take with you. So I think there's lots of fun reasons for why you might want to create a sleeve. For me, there are two compelling reasons. One is I actually prefer having magnetic closures, and that's what I'm working on here. So I've just taken a piece of scrap that was left over from my cuts to create my two pocket or cover sleeves. And so the exact width and length of this doesn't matter too much, but what I've decided to do is actually double this up and fold it in half so that it is nice and durable. Now, one layer of this is going to be super durable, so you don't have to worry about it tearing. But it just feels a little bit more substantial in the hand when you double that up. Plus, because I want there to be a magnetic closure, I will ultimately need to hide a magnet. And I accidentally put this on the wrong end of my cover here. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you're putting this on the outside edge of your cover. And you can see the nice thing about the pre-made Graphic 45 Traveler's Notebooks is that they do have rounded corners. So that makes it really easy to slip these covers on and off. And at the end of the day, the cover measures, in terms of height, it measures 8 and 7/8 of an inch tall. So that's only an eighth of an inch taller than the original cover of the Graphic 45 Traveler's Notebook. And so even though it's only a smidge taller, the notebook slides in pretty easily. Now here, these are the largest size magnets that I have, although I just ordered some from Tonic Studios that are, I think, closer to an inch in diameter. And I think that size magnet would be much, much better for an application like this because you want it to be strong. And these small magnets, sometimes you can get really, really small, super strong magnets, but these aren't those. So I like these. They're great for flips and flaps and mini albums. They're super thin and they're good for that purpose. But and you'll see this later in the video, I didn't think it was strong enough. And if that ever happens and you are finding that your magnets aren't strong enough, sometimes, it doesn't always work, but sometimes it can be helpful to just double up your magnet, and that can sometimes give it a little bit more sort of magnetic pull and can help. And so what I'm going to do, because I don't discover that till later, is I'm going to enclose my magnet in this little closure band here. And you can feel free to burnish really, really aggressively with this fabric paper because it's really, really durable. And in fact, you may intentionally want to distress it and crumple it up before you start on your project. If you are planning on washing it, though, you want to pre-wash, kind of like when you're sewing with certain types of materials. You might want to pre-wash the fabric before you actually make your project. That way, if there's going to be any shrinkage, then it happens before you make your cuts. So you can see what that does with the texture that gets created when you wash this material. And it is meant to be safe to go through the wash. It's fine to. Here's where I add the second magnet. And I'm actually putting 2 magnets on my cover. And the reason for that is when your notebook can be kind of skinny-ish in the beginning if you don't have a lot of things in there, if you're not putting additional like ephemera or receipts or anything like that. And so I wanted one magnet closure setting for when it's still relatively thin. And then I wanted to give myself a second magnetic closure spot for when I actually start to use this more and it starts to fill up with stuff like receipts or additional little notes and things like that. So this actually has two closure positions, and here's where I've decided I needed a second magnet, but I want to hide this magnet. So then I decided I will line the inside of my closure band here just with some scrap pattern paper that was left over from some of my other cuts. So again, you can kind of avoid this if you have a strong enough, large enough magnet, and or you use two side by side. That could help a little bit as well. But here, because I've already hidden one magnet, I stacked one on top of the other, and it did help a little bit. I think ultimately, when I make this using my Cafe Parisienne DCE papers, I'm gonna use the larger magnet. And because the papers are white core and I am putting them over black fabric paper, I am trying to be mindful to always ink all of the edges. That way, that white core of the pattern paper isn't it doesn't stand out so much against that black background. So it's a lot easier to work with our two sleeves when they're sort of in separate halves like this. That's not how this is ultimately going to look. But I want to leave them detached from one another while I decorate and attach all of the mats and layers. That way I can adjust them if I need. I can burnish really firmly, and they aren't while they're detached from one another, they're just easier to kind of move around and sort of manipulate. So what I'm doing is cutting down some lovely papers here, and the thing that I am trying to be mindful of is that I don't want to center, in particular this pattern, directly in the middle of that 4-inch width that is the front of my sleeve. The reason being that I'm actually going to attach another piece of fabric paper, and that's going to wrap around and connect my front and back sleeve pieces. So there's going to actually be a portion of this design that's going to be hidden or covered, about 1/2 inch of it or so. So that's why when you see me placing this, I'm covering up where I anticipate attaching essentially the spine piece. And I'm centering based off of what's visible. So that's one thing, if you're going to create this, that might be one thing to just keep in mind. You don't want to center it within that entire panel, because a portion of that panel, at least the way that I'm attaching everything, a portion of that panel is going to actually be hidden. And the reason for that is because I actually like for the spine piece to come over top of these sleeve pieces. But I suppose you could, I mean, you can't really do it the way that the order that I've done it in, but it is, I suppose, possible to attach it to the bottom of this. But I found it, I like the finish of it better with the spine covering the front. So that'll become a little bit more clear when I attach that final piece. But for all of these mats and layers, score tape might be a little bit overkill because this is really just decorative. But I still, since we're building this to last, since I've chosen to use the fabric paper, I want to just make sure that everything that I'm using is nice and strong adhesive, will be durable over time. So I've got my score tape all the way to the edges, all the way along the outside edges of this panel. And then I've just squiggled on some liquid adhesive so that it becomes a nice, permanent, durable, long-lasting bond. And when I go to burnish, I'm keeping my left hand on top of my magnets so I know where those magnets are. I don't want to burnish too firmly over those magnets and create indentations and whatnot in the paper. I don't want it to be too visible. So I do burnish over the magnets and around them as best I can, but I like to adjust how firmly I'm pushing down so that I'm not creating harsh lines there. So now with this panel here, this is going to be the spine piece. And what I'm doing is I'm just double checking, since all of this was sort of on the fly, I'm double checking the height that I need to cut this to. And it does indeed end up being 8 7/8 of an inch tall. And then I've cut the width of this. And again, this was a lot of design on the fly, but I want to show that because if you want, you can adapt this to any notebook that you have or that you want to make. I have a lot of mini album dies. I have a lot of notebook dies. And so you can always adapt this to suit whatever size notebook you want to wrap or create a sleeve for. So it just so happens that I need a stretch that is 5 inches wide, and that's going to give me about 1/2 inch overlap with the front cover sleeve and the back cover sleeve, and a nice loose fit around the spine. So what I'm going to do is just, again, using the strongest adhesive that I have, I've put a line of adhesive on the edge of my cover sleeve, the little pocket here, and a line of adhesive along my spine piece. That way, I always want adhesive all the way to the outside edges of anything that I glue down, because if there's ever going to be any kind of lifting, it's most likely going to happen along those outside edges. And I'm going to use my grid mat to ensure that I've got this attached in a nice squared off alignment, and that it's nice and centered or squared up along the bottom as well. And so I'll do the same and attach this to the back cover. And I did run a little bit of ink on the inside of that score tape that I have there, so that the sort of that vignetting that I did where I inked around all the edges, that it also appears inked around the edge that is butting up against the spine as well. So that just helps to make it look a little bit more finished. And in this case, the liquid adhesive, again, it's going to give a nice permanent bond, but I also felt like I needed it so that I had the wiggle room that I would need in case I had a hard time getting this lined up. But you just want to make sure that along the top edge and along that bottom edge that everything is nice and straight and lined up perfectly. And then of course you want to burnish this really well. Now it can be kind of hard to burnish while your traveler's notebook is still inside your sleeve. I did try it, but ultimately it's better to just take the traveler's notebook out and burnish it that way. So that is the sleeve pretty much complete, and it's really, really pretty cool. I love the finished look of this because one of the things with traveler's notebooks that I don't love, I don't hate it either, but I just don't love the grommets, at the top and bottom, and the cording that you can see. So if you're like me and you don't love that look, creating a sleeve like this hides all of that. And as you can see, I pulled my traveler's notebook out. Now to do that, you do have to bend the notebook covers back a little bit, because it is a fairly tight fit. And if you want a looser fit, then on that inside cover, the width of my inside cover is 3 5/8 of an inch. If you made that more narrow, then you would have more room to kind of slide your traveler's notebook out. The other thing that's a little bit of you lose a little bit of functionality by creating this sleeve, because the original traveler's notebook from Graphic 45 does have pockets in the front and back covers. So you still have access to those pockets because nothing's glued down. The whole thing can slip in and out. And I guess technically you can still put items in there. It's just not very accessible behind this sleeve. You could maybe see the sleeve itself as a pocket and just slot things inside there. So, maybe you still have pockets that are functional. They're just not perfect and exactly the same way that you would use them in the original traveler's notebooks. So what I'll do is now also decorate the inside of my sleeve, and just using some more gorgeous papers from the Let It Be collection. I'm also going to decorate the actual notebooks that you can swap in and out of the original traveler's notebook. Now, the way traveler's notebooks are created, they are meant to be durable. I think the Graphic 45 one feels really high quality and will be long lasting as well. And the whole benefit of a traveler's notebook style of binding is that you can swap in and out your individual notebooks. And in fact, each of the pre-made Graphic 45's traveler's notebooks can actually hold up to 4 notebook inserts. So you can hold quite a bit in there. It only comes with 3, but there is actually a 4th cording. And so if you wanted, you could put a 4th notebook in there, or you could make a dashboard and put a dashboard in if you wanted. Lots of different options. But it is designed so that it can be easy to swap in and out notebooks, especially as you fill up your notebooks. So I don't necessarily feel like the durability of this sleeve is the primary reason why I wanted to create the sleeve. The primary reason is just aesthetics. One, I like the magnetic closure. Here you can see how far I had to bend back the cover in order to fit my sleeve. And I just think it's a nicer finish. It looks like a leather-bound book. And that was the look that I was going for. So if you didn't have fabric paper, you could always do the same thing with just cardstock as well and create a cardstock sleeve. the fabric paper just has a really nice feel to it. I know it's really durable, so I don't have to feel like I need to be overly precious with the notebook. And the spine's really nice. It doesn't have it has this really nice soft curved edge around there too. So it's just overall, I think, aesthetically for me, a nicer look, and the reason why I wanted to create this sleeve. And as I mentioned, I'll be doing this again with the Cafe Parisienne papers, and that one I'll be making as a gift for my mom. So I may or may not have a separate tutorial video on that, because all the steps are going to essentially be the same. But if I have any innovations or anything in how to make this a little bit easier, then I'll definitely shoot another tutorial video. But this is a pretty simple project, actually. At the end of the day, it wasn't too hard to do, and it doesn't take too much in terms of paper or supplies. It's really, if you're choosing to use the fabric papers, that might be the hardest thing to get a hold of. The other really fun option is, I know that Sizzix has some of their texture rolls are have like a metallic finish. So I think they have gold and silver, rose gold, things like that. And those can be really fun to work with as well. And it's the same thing. It's the same sort of really durable fabric paper. And what's cool is you could maybe mix and match. So if you wanted your spine to maybe have a little bit of a metallic finish, your spine piece could be made from a different color or material than your the two individual sleeves on your front and back covers. So that might be another fun little option to play with. And so what I will do is, with the rest of this video, I'm really just going to show how I decorated the inside of each of the inserts. And for these, you do have to make some custom cuts. So I don't have the exact measurements, but all I did was, since I want a little bit of that craft paper to show as a little bit of a border, I just cut down a piece that is a little bit more narrow than that pocket. And I'm going to keep the decorations on these inserts fairly minimal, because these are consumables. Like these portions, these notebook inserts, once they're filled, unless you're filling them with something that is going to be maybe like a journal that you keep. But if it's just like an idea book or something like that, likely it's going to be something that you will just throw away. So that being the case for me, I am not going to spend too much of my paper decorating it a ton. What I prefer is, I want it to look nice so that I have something nice to look at when I use it, but I'm gonna be pretty minimal with it. So you only need a stretch that is 3.5 inches wide, and from one strip, 3.5 by 12-inch strip, you can actually get 2 matte layers, as long as you can use the backside. So you don't want anything that's directional on both sides. And you do have to be a little bit careful when you're making the diagonal cut, because the only way it fits is for you to kind of butt the 2 diagonal edges together, and then you're going to use the pattern from one side of the paper on one of your pockets, and then you just flip it over to the other side and you'll have the mirror image of that to use on the back of your cover. And the what's nice is once you've got one of these made, you can use that as a template to cut more of them. And that's basically what I did, was try to save one as a template before gluing it down. But that's the lovely thing about Graphic 45 papers, is that they are really well coordinated. So of course, the when you flip it over to the back, it's all going to coordinate and look beautiful. And you could also, I guess, decorate the back of the pocket. But like I said, I wanted to keep the decorations minimal so that I'm not using a ton of my beautiful papers here. And I've already got everything cut out, so I'm just sorting which papers will go with which covers. And then I can, again, just to keep everything really consistent, make sure that I'm inking up all of my edges. And I'm just using the Graphic 45 hybrid ink pad in black. That's what I use for all of the pieces that decorated the outside covers. And so even though against the brown, black may not make the most sense, but I just wanted to stay consistent with what I used on the outside of the sleeve. But you could use a brown, like vintage photo. Graphic 45 doesn't have a brown color in their ink pad line yet. And so that's why I went with black, but you can use any ink that you prefer. And these are just purely decorative mats and layers, so I'm not using my super expensive score tape here, but I still like to get dry adhesive as close to the edge of all of the outside edges as much as possible. Again, that's so that if there's going to be any lifting, it's more likely to happen, at the edges where those outside edges might get caught on other things or might, pull up. And so that's why I like to have adhesive going all the way around. And that way I don't have to worry when I go to put my liquid adhesive. I don't have to worry about getting that liquid adhesive close to the edge where it might ooze out and then I have a bit of a mess. So I can just very loosely just squiggle on a little bit of liquid adhesive in the center, and that'll be enough to give it a nice permanent bond and still keep all of the edges nice and well secured down. Whatever adhesive you do end up using, you just want to make sure that you're burnishing really well though, because even a dry adhesive possibly benefits more from a firm burnish, because what you're doing when you're burnishing is you're pushing all of the air out, and air is what can potentially dry out that adhesive and cause it to actually lose its stickiness over time. And that's more apt to happen in more humid climates. So something to be aware of, and that's the reason why if I'm making anything to last, I always use liquid adhesive as well. The liquid adhesive I prefer is Lineco Neutral pH because it's low water content PVA glue. And because it's low water content, it's fairly quick grabbing and it won't wrinkle or warp your paper. If you're working with thin paper though, and I would not consider Graphic 45 thin paper, Graphic 45 papers are more like a lightweight cardstock. They're very high quality. But if you do have thin paper and that's what's perfect for your project, then you might want to consider Collal all-purpose glue, because that is a solvent-based glue and it doesn't absorb into your paper, so it won't wrinkle it. So here is a final look. So as you can see, there's two positions that my magnetic closure can lock into. I have my 3 notebooks all decorated. I didn't decorate the back cover much. I just took some scraps, these little strips that I had left over. Instead of throwing them away, which I would never do, or saving them for another project, I just added just that little splash of color on the back there. And that way it's not so plain, but I don't have to make new cuts into my gorgeous papers. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. And if you're already a subscriber to my channel, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, consider subscribing to my channel and ringing the notification bell so you know whenever I post new videos to my channel. Thanks again, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.